What happens when a joke becomes betrayal and a husband takes his revenge by the law? I thought humiliating my husband in front of his boss was harmless fun. I never expected he'd stay so calm until the moment I was served with legal papers in front of everyone. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning light filtered through our kitchen window as I watched Matthew quietly buttering Sophie's toast, his movements mechanical and distant. At 33, I'd grown tired of his predictable routine, the same breakfast, the same silence, the same avoidance of eye contact that had become our new normal. "Daddy, why do you look sad all the time?" Sophie asked, her 8-year-old voice cutting through the tension like a knife. I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Daddy's not sad, sweetheart. He's just thinking about his boring insurance job, aren't you, Matt?" Matthew's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. He never did anymore. "Your father takes everything too seriously," I continued, spreading jam on my own toast with deliberate casualness. "I keep telling him he needs to lighten up, have some fun. Life's too short to be so serious all the time. But Mommy, his face looks—" "Sophie, finish your breakfast or you'll be late for school," Matthew interrupted gently, his voice barely above a whisper. I rolled my eyes. See what I mean? Everything's so dramatic with him. My phone buzzed against the counter. I glanced at the screen and felt a familiar flutter in my stomach. A message from Rowan. "Looking forward to our lunch meeting today. Hope we can discuss those projects we talked about." I quickly turned the phone face down, but not before catching Matthew's reflection in the window. He'd been watching. "Who is that?" he asked, still not turning around. "Just work stuff. Nothing you'd find interesting." I slipped the phone into my pocket. Unlike some people, I actually have ambition. I don't plan to stay stuck in the same dead-end position forever. Sophie's fork clattered against her plate. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" "We're not fighting, baby," I said, shooting Matthew a look that dared him to contradict me. "Grown-ups just have different ways of talking about things. Right, Matt?" He finally turned around, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in days. There was something different there. Not the hurt I'd grown accustomed to, but something colder, more calculating. "Right," he said simply. "Just grown-up talk." The phone in my pocket buzzed again, then again. Matthew began loading the dishwasher, his movements precise and methodical. I watched him rinse each plate exactly 3 times, arrange the utensils in perfect rows. Everything had to be just so with him. No spontaneity, no passion, no excitement. "You know you're doing that wrong, don't you?" I said, leaning against the counter. "The plates go in facing the center, not all the same direction." He paused, his hand still holding a dinner plate. "I've been doing dishes for 15 years, Tamsin." "Well, maybe it's time you learned to do them right." Sophie looked between us, her eyes wide. "I don't like it when you use that voice, Mommy." "What voice?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The mean voice. The one you use when you're mad at Daddy." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm not being mean. I'm just trying to help your father improve himself. There's nothing wrong with wanting better for your family." Matthew closed the dishwasher and turned to face me fully. "Sophie, go brush your teeth. I'll drive you to school today." "But Mommy always—" "Go on, sweetheart." After Sophie left the room, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the distant hum of traffic, the tick of the wall clock that had belonged to his grandmother. "You can't keep doing this," Matthew said finally. "Doing what?" "You know what?" My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, unable to resist checking. 3 messages from Rowan, each more flirtatious than the last. I felt a thrill of power, of being wanted, of mattering to someone who actually had influence and success. "I have to go," I said, grabbing my purse. "Some of us have important meetings today." "Tamsin." I stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. "This has to stop." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." I left without another word, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked to my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing at the kitchen window, watching me drive away. My phone rang as I pulled out of the driveway. Jean, Matthew's mother. "Tamsin, dear, we need to talk." I sighed. "Good morning to you too, Jean." "Don't get smart with me. I heard about what happened at the office last week." My stomach dropped. "I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard you made a fool of my son in front of his colleagues. I heard you've been carrying on with his boss like some kind of... Well, I won't say what." "Jean, you're being dramatic. I was networking, building professional relationships. Maybe if Matthew had more ambition, he'd understand. That boy has worked his tail off for that company for 8 years. He's provided for you and Sophie without complaint. And this is how you repay him?" "I'm not having this conversation." "Oh, yes, you are. I've known you since you were 25 years old, Tamsin. I watched you chase after my son because he was stable, because he was reliable, because he would take care of you. And now that you have everything you wanted, you're throwing it away for what? Some excitement?" "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You think you deserve better. You think you're entitled to more. But let me tell you something. Respect is earned, not taken. And right now, you're earning nothing but shame." "I have to go, Jen." "Show some respect for your husband, Tamsin, before it's too late." The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot of my office building, hands shaking slightly as I reapplied my lipstick in the mirror. Jan didn't understand. None of them did. I was 33 years old, still attractive, still smart, still capable of so much more than being Matthew's quiet little wife. My phone lit up with another message from Rowan. "Can't wait to see you today. Wear that blue dress I like." I smiled, feeling the familiar rush of being desired, of being seen as more than just a mother and wife. Matthew had stopped noticing me years ago. When was the last time he'd complimented my appearance, or suggested we go somewhere nice, or even touched me with any real passion? I deserved better. I deserved to be appreciated. As I walked into the office building, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. I looked good, confident, successful, alive, not like the tired housewife I'd been becoming. Today was going to be a good day. The office buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy as I settled at my desk, but I could feel eyes on me. Whispered conversation stopped when I walked by. Lila, my closest friend at work, kept glancing over with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Tamsin, can I see you for a minute?" Lila appeared at my cubicle, her voice unusually formal. "Sure, what's up?" She gestured toward the break room. "Privately." I followed her, noticing how several coworkers suddenly became very interested in their computer screens as we passed. The break room was empty except for the perpetual smell of burnt coffee and the hum of the ancient refrigerator. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "You look like someone died." Lila closed the door behind us. "Tam, we need to talk about you and Rowan." "What about us?" "People are talking." I shrugged, adding cream to my coffee with deliberate nonchalance. "People always talk. It's an office. Gossip is the only entertainment around here." "This isn't just gossip anymore. Sarah from accounting said she saw you two at Marcello's last Thursday, holding hands. We were having a business lunch, and we weren't holding hands. He was helping me look at some documents." "At a romantic Italian restaurant. Come on, Tam." "Since when is Marcello's romantic? It's just a restaurant." Lila sat down across from me, her expression serious. "Listen to yourself. You're making excuses. And honestly, the way you've been talking about Matthew lately, it's not okay." "What do you mean?" "Last week when we were all at lunch, you called him boring and pathetic in front of everyone. You said he had no ambition, no backbone. People were uncomfortable." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I was just venting. Friends are supposed to listen when you need to vent. Venting is saying you had a fight. What you did was character assassination. And now, with all this Rowan stuff... There is no Rowan stuff. "Tamsin." Lila's voice was gentle but firm. I've been your friend for 3 years. I care about you, but you're married. You have a daughter, and Rowan is Matthew's boss. This could destroy everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Matthew. Dinner tonight. Sophie wants to try that new pizza place. I stared at the message, feeling a familiar irritation. Pizza place. How exciting. How ambitious. See? I showed Lila the text. This is what I'm talking about. Pizza. That's the height of adventure for Matthew. Meanwhile, Rowan is talking about promoting me to senior coordinator. He sees my potential. Is that what he's calling it? Don't be crude. I'm being realistic. Rowan has a reputation, Tam. Ask anyone who's worked here longer than a year. What kind of reputation? The kind where he gets very interested in attractive female employees for a few months, then suddenly loses interest when things get complicated. I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. You're jealous. Excuse me? You're jealous that someone finally recognizes my worth instead of taking me for granted. That's not... You know what? I don't need this. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I thought you were my friend, but apparently you're just like everyone else. You want me to stay small, stay quiet, stay grateful for scraps. Tamsin, wait. But I was already walking out, ignoring the stares from the cubicles around us. I could hear Lila calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on work, but the whispers seemed louder now. Every laugh felt directed at me. Every hushed conversation felt like judgment. My computer chimed with an instant message from Rowan. How's my favorite marketing coordinator today? I glanced around, then typed back, better now. Good. I have some ideas for that campaign we discussed. Want to grab lunch and talk strategy? Absolutely. Great. Meet me at the elevator at noon. And Tam, wear that blue dress. It brings out your eyes. I looked down at my black pants and white blouse. I'd have to go home and change, but it would be worth it. Someone appreciated the effort I put into my appearance. Someone noticed me. At 11:30, I told my supervisor I had a doctor's appointment and left early. The drive home took 15 minutes, giving me just enough time to change and get back. The house was empty. Matthew at work, Sophie at school. I stood in front of my closet, looking at the blue dress Rowan liked. It was a little tight, a little shorter than I usually wore to work, but it made me feel attractive. Powerful. As I was applying fresh lipstick, my phone rang. Petra, my younger sister. Hey, what's up? I answered, still looking in the mirror. I just got off the phone with Jean. My stomach sank. Oh. She's worried about you, Tam. She says there are rumors going around about you and some guy from work. Jean needs to mind her own business. Is it true? Is what true? Are you having an affair? The word hung in the air between us. Affair. It sounded so sordid, so cliché. What Rowan and I had wasn't an affair. It was a connection, an understanding, a recognition of what I could be. I'm not having this conversation. Tamsin, I'm your sister. I love you. But if you're doing what I think you're doing... You don't know anything about my life, Petra. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. So talk to Matthew. Go to counseling. Don't blow up your family over some midlife crisis. I'm 33. That's hardly midlife. You know what I mean. No, I don't. I know that everyone expects me to be grateful for a man who ignores me, takes me for granted, and has no ambition beyond his next insurance claim. Well, maybe I want more than that. What about Sophie? What about her? She's 8 years old, Tam. She needs stability. She needs her parents together. She needs a mother who's happy and fulfilled, not one who's slowly dying of boredom. There was a long pause. I can't support this. I'm not asking you to. If you go through with whatever you're planning, don't expect me to take sides. I won't choose between you and Matthew, but I won't pretend this is okay either. Fine. Tamsin. I hung up and turned off the phone. Everyone was so quick to judge, so ready to tell me what I should want, what I should accept. None of them understood what it felt like to be married to someone who treated you like a piece of furniture. I grabbed my purse and headed back to the office, arriving just as Rowan stepped out of the elevator. He was tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit that fit him perfectly. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine appreciation. "There's my beautiful marketing coordinator," he said, loud enough for several people to hear. I felt a thrill of pride. When was the last time Matthew had called me beautiful? "Ready for lunch?" Rowan asked, offering his arm. "Absolutely." As we walked toward the exit, I caught sight of Lila watching from across the lobby. Her expression was a mixture of disappointment and concern. I lifted my chin and smiled brighter, letting Rowan guide me out into the sunshine. Let them talk, let them judge. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The office party was being held at Skyline, a trendy rooftop bar downtown that Rowan had suggested. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a red cocktail dress that hugged my curves and made me feel confident. Matthew had offered to drive us, but I'd insisted on meeting him there. I wanted to make an entrance. The bar was already crowded when I arrived at 7. String lights created a warm glow against the city skyline, and the buzz of conversation mixed with soft jazz music. I spotted Rowan immediately, holding court near the bar with several department heads. "Tamsin," he called out when he saw me, his face breaking into that charming smile that made my heart race. "You look absolutely stunning." I felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward us as he approached, and I loved it. This was what it felt like to be desired, to be the center of attention. "Thank you," I said, accepting the glass of wine he handed me. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Matthew's monthly salary, and he wore it with the confidence of a man who knew his worth. "Have I mentioned how lucky we are to have you on the team?" Rowan said, his hand briefly touching my lower back as he guided me toward the group. "Only about a dozen times today," I laughed, feeling giddy from the attention and the wine. We mingled with the crowd, Rowan introducing me to people I'd only heard about. Regional managers, executives from the corporate office. With each introduction, he found a way to compliment me, to highlight my contributions to the company. "Tamsin here is the brains behind our new client retention strategy," he told the regional VP. "Brilliant mind for marketing." I glowed under the praise. This was what I'd been missing: recognition, appreciation, respect for my intelligence and capabilities. It was nearly 8 when Matthew finally arrived, looking uncomfortable in his best suit, the same one he'd worn to every company function for the past 5 years. He scanned the crowd until he spotted me, then made his way over with that hesitant smile he wore when he was nervous. "Sorry I'm late," he said quietly. "Traffic was terrible." "Matthew," Rowan extended his hand with practiced corporate charm. "Glad you could make it. Your wife has been the life of the party." "I'm sure she has," Matthew replied, and something in his tone made me glance at him sharply. But his expression was neutral, polite. "Can I get you a drink?" I asked, suddenly feeling awkward, with both men standing there. "Just a beer, thanks." I left them talking and went to the bar, using the time to compose myself. When I returned, Matthew was standing alone, Rowan having moved on to another group. "Having fun?" Matthew asked, accepting his beer. "It's a work party, Matt. I'm networking." "Right, networking." There was something in his voice, not anger, not hurt, but something else, something that made me defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just making conversation." But his eyes were watchful, taking in everything. The way Rowan kept glancing over at us, the way other people looked at me, the way I kept checking my reflection in the bar's mirror. The party was in full swing when Rowan called for everyone's attention. He stood near the edge of the rooftop, the city lights creating a dramatic backdrop behind him. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "This quarter has been our most successful yet, and it's because of the incredible team we have here." Applause rippled through the group. I found myself standing closer to the front, drawn by Rowan's natural charisma. I'd especially like to recognize some of our standout performers, he continued, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. People who go above and beyond, who bring creativity and passion to everything they do. My heart raced. Was he going to announce my promotion publicly? But before I do that, Rowan said, raising his glass, I want to propose a toast to the unsung heroes of our company, the people who support our team members at home, who make it possible for us to achieve great things. I felt a flicker of confusion. This wasn't going where I'd expected. To the spouses and families who understand that success requires sacrifice, who stand behind their partners through long hours and challenging projects. The crowd murmured approval, raising their glasses. I looked around for Matthew and spotted him near the back, his expression unreadable. Of course, Rowan continued with a slight smile, some of us are lucky enough to have partners who are more hands-on in supporting our work. A few people chuckled, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Was he talking about me? Take our friend Matthew here, Rowan gestured toward the back of the crowd. His wife Tamsin has been incredibly supportive of my leadership style. Very collaborative. The chuckles were louder now, and I saw several people glancing between Matthew and me. My stomach began to twist with unease. In fact, I heard myself saying, stepping forward slightly, Matthew has always been very understanding about my career ambitions. Haven't you, honey? All eyes turned to Matthew, who stood perfectly still for a moment before walking forward through the crowd. When he reached my side, he put his arm around my waist, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt tense. Absolutely, he said, his voice calm and measured. I've always encouraged Tamsin to pursue every opportunity that comes her way. Something in his tone made the crowd shift uncomfortably. Rowan's smile faltered slightly. Well, I said, desperate to regain control of the situation. Not everyone can be as ambitious as some of us. Matthew's always been more of a steady, reliable type, content with the status quo. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I saw several people exchange glances. Lila, standing near the bar, looked mortified. That's true, Matthew said, his arm still around me. I do prefer to handle things properly, methodically. I believe in following the right procedures, taking the time to do things correctly. Exactly, I said, not catching the warning in his tone. Matthew's very thorough, sometimes to a fault. I am thorough, he agreed, especially when it comes to protecting what matters to me. The crowd was silent now, sensing an undercurrent they didn't quite understand. Rowan cleared his throat. Well, this has been illuminating, he said, forcing a laugh. But let's get back to celebrating our team's success. As the crowd began to disperse, I felt Matthew's arm drop from around my waist. When I turned to look at him, his expression was completely calm, but his eyes held something I'd never seen before. I'm going to head home, he said quietly. Sophie's at my mother's, but I promised to pick her up by 10. Already? The party just started. I think I've seen enough. He walked away without another word, leaving me standing there with Rowan and a handful of curious onlookers. I forced a bright smile and turned back to the party, but the magic of the evening had somehow evaporated. Everything okay? Rowan asked, but he was already looking around the room, his attention shifting to other conversations, other opportunities. Everything's fine, I said, downing the rest of my wine. Matthew's just tired. Long day. But as I watched my husband's retreating figure, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted, and not in the way I'd intended. The following Saturday, we were supposed to celebrate Sophie's 8th birthday at her favorite restaurant, a family-friendly place with checkered tablecloths and crayons for the kids. What should have been a joyful celebration turned into the most uncomfortable meal of my life. Jean arrived first, as she always did, wearing her best dress and that stern expression she reserved for serious family discussions. David, Matthew's older brother came with his wife Carol and their twin boys. Even Petra showed up, though she'd barely spoken to me since our phone call earlier in the week. Sophie was excited, chattering about her birthday wishes and the new bike she hoped to get. She looked adorable in the pink dress I'd bought her dark hair in careful curls. For a moment, watching her smile, I felt a pang of guilt about the tension that had been building in our house. "Grandma Jean!" Sophie launched herself into her grandmother's arms. "Did you bring my present?" "Of course I did, sweetheart," Jean said, but her eyes were on me over Sophie's head, cold and assessing. Matthew was quiet during the drive over, and he remained quiet as we ordered drinks and looked at menus. The silence between us was becoming normal, but in front of his family, it felt more pronounced. "So, Tamsin," David said as we waited for our food, "Matthew tells me you've been very busy at work lately." "That's right," I said, straightening in my chair. "I'm up for a promotion to senior marketing coordinator. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, more opportunities for advancement." "That's wonderful," Carol said politely. "It must be exciting." "It is. Finally, someone recognizes my potential instead of expecting me to be content with mediocrity." I felt Matthew tense beside me, but he said nothing. "Mediocrity?" Jean's voice was sharp. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I just mean that some people are satisfied with staying in the same position forever, never pushing themselves to grow or achieve more." Sophie looked up from her coloring. "Are you talking about Daddy?" The table fell silent. I felt every eye on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. "I'm just talking about career goals, sweetheart. Finish your picture." "But Daddy works really hard," Sophie continued innocently. "He helps people when their cars get broken or their houses get hurt. That's important, right?" "Of course it's important," I said quickly. "I never said it wasn't." "You kind of did," David said quietly. "You called it mediocrity." "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" John's voice could have cut glass. I looked around the table at their faces, David's disapproval, Carol's discomfort, Petra's disappointment, and Sophie's confusion. Only Matthew remained expressionless, cutting his steak with mechanical precision. "I meant that I have ambitions beyond just settling. I want to make something of myself." "And what exactly do you think you've been doing for the past 8 years?" Jean asked. "You have a beautiful daughter, a devoted husband, a comfortable home. What more do you need to make something of yourself?" "I need to feel valued, appreciated, like I matter." "You don't feel valued by your family?" David asked. "That's not what I said." "It's what you implied." My phone buzzed against my purse. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, and again. "Aren't you going to get that?" Petra asked. "It's probably just work." "On a Saturday?" Jean's eyebrow arched. "During your daughter's birthday dinner?" The phone buzzed again. Matthew glanced at my purse, then back at his plate. "Maybe you should turn it off," he said quietly, "so we can focus on Sophie. It might be important. More important than your daughter's birthday." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Of course not. Mummy, why do you and Daddy sleep in different rooms now?" Sophie's voice cut through the tension like a knife. The entire table froze. Carol's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. David's jaw tightened. Jean's eyes narrowed to slits. "What?" I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my own ears. "Sweetie, what are you talking about?" "Daddy sleeps in the guest room. I heard you talking about it on the phone. You said he was being dramatic." I wanted to disappear. Every face at the table was staring at me, waiting for an explanation. "Sometimes grown-ups just need space to think," I said carefully. "It doesn't mean anything serious." "Are you getting divorced?" Sophie asked, her voice small and worried. "No," I said quickly. "Of course not. Who told you that word?" "I heard it on TV. When mummies and daddies don't love each other anymore, they get divorced, and the kids have to choose who to live with." Jean's face had gone pale. David was staring at Matthew, who continued eating as if nothing had happened. "Nobody's getting divorced," I said firmly. "Daddy and I are just working through some things. All couples do that." "What kind of things?" Sophie pressed. "Adult things. Nothing for you to worry about." "But if you're not getting divorced, why does Daddy look so sad all the time? And why don't you eat dinner together anymore? And why do you always check your phone when you think nobody's looking?" The accuracy of her observations was devastating. I glanced around the table at the faces of Matthew's family, people who had welcomed me, supported me, treated me like their own daughter and sister. "Sophie," Matthew said gently, "why don't you tell everyone about the art project you're working on at school? But I want to know why." "The art project," he repeated firmly but kindly. Sophie sighed but launched into a description of her painting, and the conversation gradually shifted to safer topics. But the damage was done. The rest of the dinner was stilted, full of forced cheerfulness and careful avoidance of anything personal. When we got home, Matthew helped Sophie get ready for bed, while I cleaned up the kitchen. My phone had buzzed 6 more times during dinner, all messages from Rowan asking about my weekend plans. "Tamsin." Jean appeared in the kitchen doorway. She'd offered to help with dishes, but I knew she wanted to talk. "Jean, if you're going to lecture me again—" "That little girl is scared," she said, her voice low and intense. "She's 8 years old and she's watching her family fall apart, and she doesn't understand why." "Nothing's falling apart. Isn't it? You humiliate my son in public. You ignore your daughter at her own birthday dinner to check messages from God knows who. And you talk about your marriage like it's a prison sentence. You don't understand the situation. I understand enough. I understand that you made vows to love and honor that man, and instead you're tearing him down every chance you get. He's pulling away from me. Because you're pushing him away. You think I don't see what's happening? You think I don't know the signs?" My phone buzzed again. Jean's eyes flicked to it, then back to my face. "Choose carefully, Tamsin, because once you cross certain lines, there's no going back. And that little girl upstairs, she's watching everything, learning what love looks like from her parents." She left me standing in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I dried the same plate for the 3rd time. When I finally went upstairs, I could hear Matthew reading Sophie a bedtime story. His voice was gentle, patient, full of the love that used to make my heart flutter when we first met. I stood outside her door, listening to them laugh together, and for a moment, I wondered what I was doing, what I was risking, what I might lose. Then my phone buzzed with another message from Rowan, and the moment passed. It was nearly midnight when I found Matthew on the back deck, sitting in the darkness with a cup of coffee and a manila folder spread out on the patio table. The soft glow from the kitchen window barely reached where he sat, making him look like a shadow against the night. "Matt?" I stepped outside, pulling my robe tighter against the cool air. "What are you doing out here so late?" He looked up at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Just taking care of some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" "Household stuff, finances, making sure everything's in order." I moved closer, trying to see what was spread across the table, but he casually closed the folder and set his coffee cup on top of it. "Is everything okay? With money, I mean." "Everything's fine, Tamsin. Just being thorough." That word again, thorough. He'd been using it a lot lately, along with proper procedures and doing things correctly. It was starting to irritate me. "You've been acting strange lately," I said, settling into the chair across from him. "Distant, more than usual." "Have I?" "Yes, and Sophie's starting to notice. She asked me again today if we're getting divorced." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that we're working through some issues, but that everything will be fine." He nodded slowly, taking a sip of his coffee. "Will it be fine, Tamsin?" The question caught me off guard. There was something in his tone, not accusatory, not angry, but almost curious, like he was genuinely asking for information. "Of course it will. Why would you even ask that?" "Because I want to make sure I handle everything properly. That I don't make any mistakes. Handle what properly? Whatever comes next. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. Matt, you're scaring me. What's going on? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me in the darkness. Do you love me, Tamsin? The question hung in the air between us. I opened my mouth to give the automatic answer. Of course I love you, but something in his expression stopped me. That's a strange question. Is it? We've been married for 10 years. We have a daughter together. But lately, I'm not sure you even like me very much. Don't be ridiculous. Am I being ridiculous? Because from where I sit, it seems like you find me boring, unambitious, mediocre. Those were your words, weren't they? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I was just venting. Everyone vents about their spouse sometimes. To their coworkers, to my boss, at public events. I didn't mean for it to sound the way it did. How did you mean for it to sound? I struggled for an answer. The truth was, I had meant it exactly the way it sounded. Matthew was boring. He was unambitious. He was content with mediocrity. But saying that now, looking at him sitting there so calmly, seemed cruel. I want more, Matt. I want to feel alive again. I want to matter. You do matter. You matter to Sophie. You matter to me. But I don't feel like I matter to you. When was the last time you really looked at me? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful, or took me somewhere special, or made me feel like I was more than just the person who does your laundry and makes your dinner? He was quiet for a moment. When was the last time you wanted me to? The question hit me like a slap. What do you mean? When was the last time you looked at me like you were happy to see me? When was the last time you touched me without it feeling like an obligation? When was the last time you talked about our future together instead of complaining about our present? I didn't have an answer. I know about Rowan, Tamsin. My blood turned to ice. What? I know about the lunches, the text messages, the way you light up when he's around and shut down when I walk in the room. Matt, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd really like to understand. I'd like to know what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, how we got to this point. His voice was still calm, still measured, but there was something underneath it, a pain so deep it made my chest ache. It's not about what you did wrong, I said quietly. It's about what you didn't do. You stopped trying, Matt. You stopped courting me, stopped making an effort. You just assumed I'd always be there no matter how much you ignored me. So you decided to find attention somewhere else. It's not like that. What is it like? I struggled to find the words. How could I explain the rush of being desired, of feeling important, of mattering to someone who had power and influence? Rowan sees my potential. He values my intelligence, my creativity. He makes me feel like I'm capable of more than just being a wife and mother. And I don't. You take me for granted. Do I? Or do I just love you enough to not need constant proof that you're worthy of it? The words hung in the air between us. In the distance, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the hum of traffic from the main road, the ordinary sounds of life continuing around us. I don't know how to fix this, I said finally. Neither do I. He stood up, gathering his papers and coffee cup. I'm going to bed. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Matt, wait. He paused at the sliding door. What kind of meeting? Just work stuff. Nothing you'd find interesting. The echo of my own words from weeks earlier hit me like a physical blow. I watched him go inside, saw the kitchen light go out, heard his footsteps on the stairs. I sat alone on the deck for another hour, thinking about everything he'd said. Part of me wanted to run inside, wake him up, tell him I was sorry, that I'd made a mistake, that I wanted to fix things. But another part of me, the part that felt alive when Rowan smiled at me, that craved the excitement of being wanted, wasn't ready to give that up. My phone buzzed with a text message. Rowan, thinking about you. Can't wait to see you Monday. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, Me too. As I headed inside, I noticed Matthew's study door was closed, and a thin line of light showed underneath. He was still awake, still working on whatever paperwork he'd been so focused on. I almost knocked, almost went in to try to talk more. Instead, I went to bed alone, listening to the sound of his keyboard clicking late into the night. I had no idea that he was methodically documenting everything. Every text message I'd forgotten to delete, every late lunch, every public humiliation, every moment of our marriage falling apart. I had no idea that Matthew, boring and unambitious as he was, had been very busy indeed. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the courthouse lobby, waiting for a meeting about Sophie's school district boundary changes. It was a mundane administrative thing, the kind of boring civic duty that Matthew usually handled. But he'd claimed he had a conflict. The lobby was busy with the usual courthouse crowd, lawyers in expensive suits, families dealing with various legal matters, clerks carrying stacks of paperwork. I checked my phone for the third time, wondering if I was in the right place. Mrs. Weiler. I looked up to see a woman in a professional blazer approaching me, carrying a leather briefcase. Yes? I'm Janet Morrison from the school district office. Thank you for coming in today. We shook hands, and she gestured toward a quieter corner of the lobby where several chairs were arranged around a low table. I have to say, I was surprised when your husband requested this meeting, she said as we sat down. The boundary changes don't actually affect your daughter's school. They don't? I felt a flicker of confusion. Then why... Tamsin. I turned at the sound of my name and felt my stomach drop. Matthew was walking toward us, but he wasn't alone. Jean was with him, her face stern and unreadable. Behind them was a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, clearly a lawyer. Matt. I stood up, my heart beginning to race. What's going on? I thought you had a meeting. I do have a meeting, he said quietly, with you. The woman from the school district looked confused. I'm sorry, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm here about boundary changes. No, Matthew said, his voice gentle but firm. You're not. That's when I saw him. A tall man in a sheriff's deputy uniform, standing by the courthouse entrance, watching our group with professional interest. Matt, what's happening? My voice came out higher than I intended. Why is there a deputy here? Why do you have a lawyer? The lawyer stepped forward, pulling a thick envelope from his briefcase. Mrs. Weiler, you're being served with divorce papers and a temporary custody order. The words hit me like a physical blow. The busy lobby seemed to fade away, all sound muffled except for the thundering of my own heartbeat. What? I whispered. You've been served, Matthew said, his voice steady and calm. Everything's been filed properly with the court. My hand shook as I took the envelope. It was heavy, official, real in a way that made everything suddenly, terrifyingly concrete. You can't be serious, I said, looking up at Matthew's face. This is just because you're upset about Rowan. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I tried counseling, Matthew said quietly. I suggested it 6 months ago. You said we didn't need it. But I didn't mean... I never thought you'd actually... File for divorce? Why not? You've made it clear that you find our marriage mediocre, that you think I'm boring and unambitious, that you'd rather spend your time with my boss than with your own family. People in the lobby were starting to stare. I could see phones coming out, people pretending to check messages, while actually recording the drama unfolding in front of them. This is humiliating, I hissed. You're humiliating me in public. Am I? Matthew's voice remained maddeningly calm. Because I seem to remember you having no problem humiliating me in public. At the office party, at Sophie's birthday dinner, in front of my coworkers and my family. That's different. How? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How was it different? Because I was the one being humiliated now instead of him. The temporary custody order gives you alternating weekends and Wednesday evenings, the lawyer continued, as if we were discussing a business transaction. All decisions regarding Sophie's education, healthcare, and welfare will be joint decisions until the final hearing. Custody order. My voice cracked. You're trying to take Sophie away from me? I'm trying to protect her, Matthew said. She's been asking me for weeks if we're getting divorced. She's scared and confused, and she needs stability. I'm her mother. Yes, you are, and I'm her father, and we both love her. But she needs to understand that actions have consequences, that families are built on respect and trust, not on taking each other for granted. Jean stepped forward, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Tamsin, you brought this on yourself. We all tried to warn you. This is insane, I said, looking around at the faces surrounding me. Matthew's calm determination, Jean's stern disapproval, the lawyer's professional detachment, the curious stares of strangers. This is completely insane. You can't just destroy our family because you're jealous. I'm not destroying our family, Matthew said. You already did that. The words hit me like a slap. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. What about Sophie? I asked desperately. What about what this will do to her? Sophie will be fine, Matthew said. She'll have 2 parents who love her, even if we can't live together anymore. She'll learn that people should treat each other with respect, that marriage is a partnership, not a competition. And what about Rowan? The words came out bitter, angry. Did you tell him about this little stunt? Because I guarantee you he's not going to be happy about being dragged into your midlife crisis. Something flickered across Matthew's face, the first crack in his calm facade. Rowan won't be a problem, he said quietly. What do you mean? I mean that Rowan has already been informed that his relationship with my wife constitutes a conflict of interest and a potential liability for the company. My blood turned to ice. You didn't. I did. I filed a formal complaint with HR, along with documentation of your affair and its impact on workplace morale. I believe they're conducting a full investigation. The lobby spun around me. My job, my promotion, my future with Rowan, everything was crumbling at once. You bastard, I whispered. No, Matthew said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. I'm a man who finally learned to protect himself and his daughter from someone who doesn't respect either of them. He turned to go, Jean following close behind. The lawyer handed me a business card. My client will be in touch through counsel from now on, he said. Have a good day, Mrs. Weiler. I stood there in the courthouse lobby, holding the divorce papers in my shaking hands, watching my husband walk away with the quiet dignity I'd spent months mocking. Around me, people pretended not to stare, while clearly enjoying the drama. My phone buzzed. A text message, but not from Rowan as I'd expected. It was from Lila. Just heard about the HR investigation. I'm sorry, Tam. I tried to warn you. I sank back into the chair, the weight of what I'd lost finally hitting me. My marriage, my job, my reputation, my future, all gone because I'd thought I deserved better than the man who'd loved me enough to fight for our family, even when I wouldn't. The courthouse lobby bustled around me, full of people dealing with the consequences of their choices. For the first time in months, I understood exactly how that felt. Matthew had been right about one thing. He was thorough, and he'd just thoroughly, methodically, and completely destroyed the life I'd taken for granted, while I was busy chasing something that had never been real.